The silent human. The hangar of the alien ship buzzed with noise, sharp tools, electric sparks, and the constant murmur of voices in the alien language of the Virelians. In the middle of all this stood a single human, quiet, calm, and completely ignored. His name was James. He wore a simple dark jumpsuit with tools strapped to his belt. His hands were covered in grease and wires. His face was tired, but his eyes, those deep, quiet eyes, watched everything. He had been working on the same engine core for days now, and yet, no one offered help. No one even said thank you. Liari, the alien girl with glowing silver eyes and dark blue skin, passed by him and laughed. Still fixing the same panel, human? Maybe we should send you back to your zoo. The other aliens laughed with her. James didn't react. He didn't even look up. He just tightened a bolt and moved on. Liari hated that. She hated how he never responded. No anger, no words, just silence. She called it weakness. Others called it submission. But the truth was, none of them really knew James. He had arrived a week ago when the ship broke down near the edge of the Dravos sector. The alien engineers had tried everything, but nothing worked. So their leaders hired a human mechanic, a last resort. They expected someone loud, messy, maybe even scared. But James was none of those things. He came alone. He didn't speak much. He didn't complain. He just got to work. And every night when the others were laughing in the mess hall, James stayed back in the hangar, adjusting circuits, rerouting power, and running silent diagnostics with a small tablet in his hand. He worked until his hands shook from exhaustion. Liari once stayed behind just to spy on him. From the shadows, she watched him rebuild a damaged power core using only scrap parts and heat from his own jacket's battery cells. It was something not even their chief engineer could have done, but she didn't praise him. No. Her pride was too strong. She simply scoffed and walked away. Still, something inside her had shifted. The next day, when a coolant line burst in the corridor, James fixed it in 5 minutes. When the ventilation stopped in the crew quarters, he built a manual override from leftover cables. Every day, problem after problem, James solved it. And every time, silently. No boasting, no drama, just results. But Liari couldn't let it go. She teased him again. You humans must love crawling. Look at you. Always under some broken pipe, she said loudly, flipping her long silver hair over her shoulder. This time James paused. He slowly stood up, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and looked directly at her. His stare wasn't angry. It wasn't cold. It was calm, deep, like a quiet ocean hiding a storm underneath. He simply said, "Do you have a better way to fix it?" Liari opened her mouth, then closed it. He walked past her, leaving a faint trail of engine grease behind. The others watched in silence. No one laughed this time. That night in the crew hallway, Liari heard a strange sound. It was soft, like whispering. She followed it and saw James sitting on the edge of the docking bay, speaking into a small voice recorder. "I'm finishing the job. One more cycle, and then I leave. I tried to stay silent, tried to believe silence was enough. But they keep testing it." He paused. "She doesn't understand yet. But one day, she will." Liari stepped back, heart pounding. He knew she was pushing him. He had always known. But instead of fighting back, he waited. Why? Why didn't he snap? The next morning, James came early, before the others even woke up. He rebuilt the shield generator from scratch. When the aliens came into the room, the core was glowing with stable energy for the first time in months. Even the captain looked impressed. Still, no one thanked him. Liari walked up to him. Her voice was softer this time. "That shield core, it was a miracle." James looked at her and gave the smallest smile. "No, just patience." And he walked away again. But this time, Liari didn't laugh. She just stood there, staring at him. Something inside her chest felt strange, like guilt, or admiration, or both. For the first time, she wondered, what happens when that kind of patience runs out? She didn't know it yet, but the answer was coming soon, and when it did, she would never forget it. Pressure builds. For the next few days, James kept working without rest. The aliens around him joked louder. The taunts were sharper now, and Layari had become strangely quiet. She still watched James from a distance, as if trying to understand something she couldn't explain. There was something in his silence now. It felt dangerous. Then it happened. A systems error shut down the ship's defense grid in the middle of deep space. Red lights flashed across the control panels. A warning echoed through the corridors. Main defense core failure. Possible breach detected. Panic spread. The crew rushed to the engine room and James was already there, checking each cable, rerunning diagnostics. The captain stormed in with his long, dark robe flapping behind him and pointed a finger straight at James. You caused this, human. You've touched every system. This is your doing. James didn't argue. He simply stepped aside and opened the error logs. But before he could explain, Layari suddenly spoke. He must have crossed the relay lines. That's why. The charge overloaded. It's a simple mistake. Even humans make them. Silence. Everyone stared at James. He looked at her, his eyes calm again, but colder than before. Without saying a word, he turned away and started fixing the issue. His hands moved fast, connecting power lines, checking sensors. 15 minutes. Later, the defense grid was back online, faster than anyone expected. Still, no one thanked him, and Layari didn't apologize. That night, James didn't eat. He walked down to the underdeck alone and sat in front of the giant Starview window. Thousands of stars burned quietly outside. A soft blue glow lit up his tired face. From his pocket, he pulled out his voice recorder again. Log 72. They blamed me today. I expected it. What I didn't expect was her. He paused. Layari. She knows I didn't cause it. She knew, but she said it anyway. I don't know if it was fear or pride, or if she just wanted to fit in, but it hurt. He stopped recording and stared into space. Behind him, hidden in the shadows, Layari listened to every word. She couldn't sleep that night, not because she felt guilty, but because something deep inside her was starting to crack. She remembered the first day James arrived. She remembered the calm way he repaired a reactor no one could fix. The quiet focus in his eyes. The fact that he never shouted, even when mocked. And now, she had lied about him. She had let the others blame him, just to stay silent, just to protect her image. The next day, she tried to speak to him. She walked into the hangar where he was rebuilding a navigation module. James, she said. He didn't look up. She tried again. The failure. I was wrong. Maybe You knew, he said without turning. Layari froze. His voice was soft, but behind it was something sharp, like steel beneath the surface. You knew it wasn't me, and you still said it. Layari felt her throat tighten. I didn't mean, doesn't matter, James said. You made your choice. And he walked away. She stood there, unable to move. Later that day, a small explosion echoed from the ship's side. A pressure valve had burst. The alarms went off again. This time, no one could find James. The captain called out, Where's the mechanic? Where's the human? No answer. Layari panicked and rushed through the halls. She finally found him, kneeling by the broken valve, hands burned, fixing it with nothing but raw wire and a welding stick. James, stop. Let me help. She started, but he didn't even look at her. He just kept working. Fast. Quiet. Cold. When the job was done, he stood up, brushed past her, and left. That's when Layari felt something she had never felt before. Not anger, not fear, shame. She turned and looked at the burned wall where James had fixed the leak, and beside it, scratched into the panel, were 3 small words in English. Silence has limits. That night, Layari couldn't sleep again. And this time, she cried. Because for the first time she understood that James wasn't weak. He wasn't quiet because he didn't know how to fight. He was quiet because he was choosing not to. But what happens when that kind of man stops choosing? What happens when the one who endures and finally breaks? Layari didn't know, but she was going to find out, and it would change her life forever. The warning. The silence between James and Layari had grown louder than any engine hum. After the incident with the valve, the ship's crew began to notice something different. James still worked, still fixed problems. But now, his movements were faster, sharper. No more patience, no more careful teaching, just results, cold, silent, exact. Even the captain started giving him more space. Layari tried to talk to him again. She walked into the engine room holding a small toolkit, pretending she needed help. James, this circuit. I can't connect it properly. Can you show me? He glanced at her. His eyes were unreadable. No, he said. Layari blinked. Why? Because I don't teach liars. He walked away. The words hit harder than any insult. Later in the briefing room, the chief engineer presented a new project, recalibrating the ship's power relay through a bypass channel. A complex, dangerous task. If done wrong, it could trigger an energy loop and destroy the ship's core. The crew looked at each other nervously. I'll do it, James said from the back. The room turned silent. The captain frowned. You sure, human? James nodded. I've done it before. I'll start tonight. Layari stepped forward. I can help. No, James cut her off. But you had your chance. He walked out, toolkit in hand. Layari stared at the door he left through. Her pride burned. Her throat felt tight. And yet, she knew he was right. She had betrayed him, even if she didn't mean to. Now she was facing the wall he had built. Brick by brick, out of silence. That night, James worked alone. The corridor lights flickered above him. The air smelled like metal and heat. Wires ran across the floor like veins under skin. He moved through them like a ghost, silent, focused, deadly precise. What no one knew was that James had seen something deep in the ship's design, a flaw, a dangerous one that could lead to a core meltdown. He had warned the crew 2 days ago, but they had laughed it off. Too many calculations, human. Don't be dramatic, the chief engineer had said. Now, James was fixing it quietly, alone. Again. He opened his voice recorder, log 76. I warned them. They didn't listen. I'm not doing this for them anymore. I'm doing this because I can't watch innocent lives burn. No matter how they treat me. A pause. She's not evil, just proud. But pride can kill people. He closed the recorder and started reconnecting the bypass. Meanwhile, Layari sat alone in her room, replaying old memory files of James fixing systems, saving the ship, enduring insults. Then she saw it, a copy of the diagnostic logs James had shown before. The same ones. She ignored. She checked them again, carefully this time. Her heart froze. James was right. If the current levels weren't reset soon, the power loop would ignite the backup batteries, and boom, the whole ship would explode from inside. She jumped up, ran, through the corridor, past confused officers, down to the core chamber. She reached the control panel just in time to see James, deep inside the core tunnel, shoulder deep in cables, sweat dripping down his face. James, she shouted. You were right. The system is collapsing. We have minutes. James didn't look back, I know. Layari ran to help him, but just as she reached for a tool, James grabbed her wrist, firm, cold. No. I'm sorry, she cried. I should have listened. Let me help you. He looked at her finally, face dirty, hands burned, but eyes sharp. Now you listen to me, he said slowly. This ship is one bad connection away from death. So unless you're ready to follow orders without question, leave. Layari didn't move. She didn't blink. She just nodded. "I'll follow," she said. James turned back to the wires. Good. They worked together, side by side for the first time, but Layari could feel it. James wasn't the same anymore. The kind human who smiled through insults was gone. In his place stood someone else, someone quiet but powerful, someone with fire behind his silence, and she knew, if this ship failed again, if anyone crossed him again, he wouldn't stay silent. Not anymore. The meltdown, the ship, was quiet. Too quiet. A strange hum echoed through the walls. It was low, soft, and dangerous. It was the kind of sound that made engineers freeze. That sound meant only one thing. The core was overheating. James ran through the lower decks, past trembling pipes and blinking red lights. His jacket was half-burned, hands already wrapped in cloth to cover the blisters. Layari ran beside him. Struggling to keep up, the ship's alarm suddenly blared. Warning, energy core unstable. Core breach in 9 minutes. The entire crew panicked. The captain shouted over the comms, "Evacuate the lower decks, find the human, get the mechanic now." But James didn't wait for orders. He was already inside the core chamber, standing, in front of the glowing cylinder that now looked like a star ready to explode. Sparks burst from the walls. A support beam collapsed behind him. Still, he didn't blink. He opened the central panel, heat blasting into his face. Cables snapped like whips. He gritted his teeth, reached in, and began rerouting the energy channels with his bare hands. Layari burst into the chamber. "James, the main. Converter's gone, you'll die in there." James didn't turn. "If I stop now, we all die." She grabbed his arm. "We can fix this together, don't do it alone." Finally, he looked at her. "No," he said, voice flat. "This is what happens when people like you play with pride instead of listening." Layari felt the weight of his words like fire across her chest. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but she couldn't. She had ignored him, mocked him, watched him suffer, and now, he was still the one trying to save them all. Suddenly, the energy spiked again. The walls glowed orange. "Get out," James said. "This place is about to go." Layari shook her head. "Not without you." He stared at her. Then, without a word, he shoved a cable into her hand. "Hold this steady. One wrong move, and this ship becomes space dust." She nodded. Together they worked, her hands shaking, his hands bleeding. Second by second, they pulled the ship back from death. Then the unthinkable happened. One of the alien engineers rushed in with a fire suppressor, trying to help, but he stepped on a broken fuse line. Sparks flew. The core screamed. James leapt forward, grabbed the sparking wire with both hands and ripped it out of the system, using only raw force. The pain knocked him to the floor. His arms twitched. Smoke rose from his gloves. And then, silence. The light stabilized. The core dimmed. The meltdown was stopped. But James didn't move. "James?" Layari knelt beside him. "James, say something." He groaned, sat up slowly, and looked at the others. Everyone stood around him, quiet, shocked, ashamed. Then James did something no one expected. He stood, walked to the main control console, and slammed a tool down hard enough to crack the panel. Enough. The entire room froze. He had never raised his voice before, but now it shook the walls. "You mock me. You blame me. You lie to me. And I fix your mess anyway. I warned you. I begged you to listen. And still, you laughed. Not anymore." No one spoke. No one dared. He looked straight at the captain. If the ship had exploded, it wouldn't be because the human failed. It would be because the crew ignored the only one who knew what was happening. The captain lowered his head. James turned to Layari. Her eyes were full of tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "We were wrong. I was wrong." He didn't answer. He just walked out of the room, leaving burned footprints on the metal floor. Later that night, the ship floated quietly in safe space. But inside the crew, a storm had begun. Everyone now saw James differently. He wasn't a tool. He wasn't a worker. He was a force, a storm in silence, a man whose patience could save lives or destroy egos. And for Layari, something else had changed forever. She had seen what patience becomes when pushed too far, and she would never ever forget it. When patience dies. For hours after the meltdown was stopped, the ship remained quiet, but it was not the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the kind you hear after a storm, when everything feels broken and different. James had disappeared. No one knew where he went. Some said he returned to his cabin. Others whispered that he was repairing the backup drives again. Layari knew better. She found him in the main corridor, sitting against the wall, arms burned and bandaged, head resting on a metal pipe. He looked calm, but not like before, not silent like a man holding back. No, this was the calm of a man who had let go. "James," she said gently. He didn't look at her. "What do you want?" She stepped forward. "To help." He laughed. A dry, sharp sound. "Now you want to help?" Layari dropped her gaze. "I made a mistake. All of us did. I lied about you. I laughed at you. And still, you saved us." "Why?" James finally looked at her. "Because I was trying to be better than the world that treated me like less." She didn't know what to say. He stood slowly, eyes meeting hers. "I stayed quiet, Layari," he said. "Not because I was weak, but because I believed people would change on their own." He stepped past her. But patience has a limit. The next day, a crew meeting was called. The entire engineering deck stood in silence as the captain arrived, followed by James. But something was different now. James wasn't in his dirty jumpsuit. He wore a sleek black uniform, one reserved for master engineers. His arms were wrapped, but his posture was straight, unshaken. The captain stepped forward. "James, after your service during the core breach." "I want to say, I don't need your thanks," James interrupted. Calm, direct. "I want something else." Everyone leaned in. "I want control of the engineering bay," he said. "Full command. No more decisions made without my sign-off. And I want every single log, every error, every change run through me." The crew gasped. "You want to replace the chief engineer?" one alien asked. James didn't blink. "Yes." A silence followed. Then, to everyone's shock, the captain agreed. "Granted." James walked into the engineering bay later that evening. He didn't speak at first. He just stood at the center console, arms crossed. The same crew who mocked him before now looked down, awkward, guilty, afraid. Then James began to speak. "You all treated me like a tool, not a person. You laughed when I warned you, blamed me for your failures, and still I fixed your ship." He paused. "But from today, things change." He walked slowly between the workstations, every step heavy. "If you don't understand something, ask. If you make a mistake, admit it. But if I ever see anyone lie, mock, or cover their failure like you did to me..." He stopped in front of the same alien who once laughed the loudest. "I will not raise my voice. I will just remove you, quietly." The alien swallowed hard and nodded. Outside the bay, Layari watched everything. Her heart was racing. This wasn't the James she once mocked. This was the real man. The one behind the silence. The one who endured humiliation, not because he couldn't fight, but because he chose not to. Until now. She walked into the bay. After everyone left, he didn't turn as she entered. "You got everything you wanted," she said. "No," he replied. "Not everything." She stepped closer. "Then what else do you want?" James looked at her, but there was no anger anymore. Just truth. I wanted someone, just one person, to believe in me before I had to prove anything. Layari's eyes stung. She whispered, "I want to be that person now." James gave her a long, quiet look, then turned back to his console. "We'll see." In the silence of the engine room, something new began. The fear was gone. So was the false pride. And in its place, respect was born. Not because of James's voice, but because they had finally heard the silence that came before the storm. And Layari knew one thing for sure. The human who had once been easy to ignore had now become impossible to forget. The apology. James sat alone in the observation deck. Outside, the stars drifted silently, endless and cold. Inside, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the dark floor beneath his boots. He had repaired everything. He had earned respect. He had silence again. But something still felt unfinished. Then he heard the soft steps behind him. Layari. She didn't speak at first. She just stood near the doorway, watching him like someone who didn't know how to begin. She had rehearsed this moment for hours. Words came and vanished. Emotions rose and sank again. Finally, she said it. James, and I'm sorry. His shoulders didn't move. She took a few steps closer. I'm not saying it because I have to. I'm saying it because I finally understand what I did. Still, he said nothing. She continued. I thought silence meant weakness. I thought pride made me strong. But it didn't. It just made me cruel. I let others mock you. I joined them. And when you needed a voice, I chose to stay quiet. Her voice cracked. You fixed systems. You saved lives. You stood alone. And all I did was judge you. I was wrong, James. So wrong. Now, slowly, James turned to look at her. His face showed no anger, just something deeper. Sadness and tiredness. Why now? He asked softly. Layari walked closer. Because you never asked for praise. You just wanted honesty. And I never gave you that. She sat beside him. I watched you save this ship more times than I can count. I saw you bleed, get blamed, stay silent, and still fight for us. And it broke me to realize I never deserved your help. But you gave it anyway. James looked ahead, again his voice low. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I know, she whispered. That's what makes it worse. The room fell silent. Only the stars spoke through the window. Then James spoke again. Calm, clear, and slow. I stayed silent because I believed people grow when you give them space. But sometimes, silence isn't kindness. It's permission. I let all of you walk over me because I didn't want to be like you. He turned to her. But I became someone else instead. Someone who gave up on being heard. Layari's voice trembled. I hear you now. He stared at her. Long, deep, like searching for something behind her words. You still believe I'm just a mechanic? He asked. She shook her head. You're more than that. You're the kind of person I want to become. James raised an eyebrow. And what kind of person is that? Layari didn't blink. One who stays kind even when others aren't? One who speaks truth without noise. One who leads even when they're left behind. Silence again. This time, peaceful. Then James sighed. A real sigh. A human one. You don't owe me forgiveness, he said. I'm not asking for it, she replied. I'm offering respect. James slowly stood. You'll have to earn it. She stood too. I will. They stood there, face to face. For the first time, equals. Not human and alien. Just two souls who had finally seen each other fully. Without pride, without judgment, without fear. James held out his hand. Layari took it, not as an apology, but as a promise. In that quiet room, something stronger than technology was repaired. A connection, a truth. And for Layari, the lesson would live forever. That the strongest voice in the galaxy sometimes speaks with silence and forgives with a hand extended, not a word spoken. The new beginning, 3 days had passed since the meltdown. The ship floated in stable orbit now, its core fully restored, its systems humming like a calm breath after chaos. The crew walked differently. They no longer mocked or whispered behind backs. Because now, they all understood. They had witnessed something rare, something silent and unstoppable. They had seen what happens when a human's patience finally runs out. James stood in the command deck beside the captain. He wasn't wearing a tool belt anymore. He wore a black and gray command jacket with a silver crest over the heart, a symbol of leadership, offered not out of protocol, but out of respect. The captain addressed the crew. By unanimous vote, we've named James as lead systems director for all future missions. His authority is final, his experience unquestioned, and his silence never again misjudged. Applause followed, not polite, earned. Liari stood at the back watching him. He didn't smile, but when his eyes found hers across the deck, he nodded. It meant more than words. She walked up to him after the ceremony. This time, no stuttering, no guilt, just clarity. "I'm being transferred," she said softly. "New assignment, but I asked for one condition." James looked curious. "Which is?" "That I report to your division, as your student." A pause. Then James gave the faintest smile. "You sure? I don't go easy on students." "I know," she said. "That's why I want to learn." He turned to face the stars through the glass wall. "You changed," he said. Liari stepped beside him. "No, you changed me." Another long silence followed, but this one was warm, not heavy. "Once said I didn't need anyone to believe in me," James said. "But I lied." He looked at her again. "I needed one person, and I think I found her." Liari's voice was barely a whisper. "You did." The next morning, the new crew prepared for launch. James walked through the hangar, no longer invisible. Every alien greeted him with respect. Some nodded, some saluted, and Liari followed behind, taking notes, asking real questions. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to understand. Not just the ship, but the man who changed everything without raising a weapon, without making a speech, just by refusing to break. As the engines fired and the stars moved outside the window, Liari turned to James. "Do you think they'll ever see us as equals?" she asked. James replied without looking away from the stars. "No, not because they won't, but because it's not about being equal. It's about being real." Liari smiled. "And what are we now?" James's voice was soft. "Real enough to be heard." And as the ship soared into the unknown, Liari knew one truth above all. She would never forget the moment the human's patience finally snapped. Because from that moment on, nothing in her world was ever the same again.